I found out someone was stealing from my front porch at 3 in the morning on a Tuesday in February. And what made it worse was that the thief lived 4 houses down and sat on the HOA board with my neighbor's wife. My name is Isaac Foster, and I have lived in the Meadowbrook Commons subdivision in Naperville, Illinois, for about 6 years now. I work as a quality control manager for a chemical manufacturing company called Midwest Solutions, which means I spend my days making sure products are properly tracked, labeled, and traceable from production to delivery. That particular skill set would become incredibly useful in ways I never imagined when I ordered a bulk shipment of premium ice melt in January 2026. The winter had been brutal that year. We had gotten hammered with snowstorm after snowstorm, and the temperatures had not gone above freezing for nearly 3 weeks straight. My driveway is steep, almost 45 degrees at the worst part, and without ice melt, it becomes a skating rink that makes leaving for work a genuine safety hazard. I had been going through bags of the stuff like crazy, sometimes using 2 or 3 bags a week just to keep things manageable. After my 3rd trip to the hardware store in 10 days, I decided to just order in bulk and be done with it. I found a supplier online that sold commercial-grade calcium chloride ice melt in 50-pound bags, and they offered a discount if you bought 10 bags or more. The stuff was not cheap, running about $30 a bag, but it was more effective than the regular rock salt and worked at lower temperatures. I placed an order for 12 bags, which came out to $360 plus shipping. The company, called Northern Supply Solutions, shipped directly from their warehouse in Milwaukee. What made their product special, and what would ultimately solve my problem, was their quality control system. Each bag had a unique batch number printed on a label, and that batch number was registered to the purchaser in their system. They did this for commercial clients who needed to track their inventory and for liability purposes. When I placed the order, I had to create an account with my name, address, and phone number. Every single bag in my shipment was from the same production batch and had sequential tracking numbers. The shipment arrived on a Thursday afternoon in mid-January. The delivery driver stacked all 12 bags on my front porch since I was not home, and my wife Deanna was at work. I got home around 6 that evening and spent the next hour hauling the bags into my garage, stacking them neatly against the back wall where I kept my lawn care equipment during winter. I opened one bag immediately and spread it on my driveway and walkway, and I was impressed with how well it worked. The ice started melting within minutes, even though it was only about 15 degrees outside. Over the next couple of weeks, I went through bags at my usual rate. I would typically keep one bag on my front porch for easy access, since running to the garage every time I needed to throw down some ice melt got old fast. I would refill from my garage stock as needed. By early February, I had gone through about 5 bags, which meant I should have had 7 bags left in my garage. Except when I counted them on a Sunday afternoon, I only had 4 bags remaining. At first, I thought maybe I had miscounted or used more than I realized. I asked Deanna if she had used any, and she said she had grabbed the porch bag a few times but had not touched the garage supply. 3 missing bags represented $90 worth of product, and I started wondering if I had somehow mixed up my count when the shipment first arrived. I checked my email receipt, which clearly stated 12 bags. I checked the packing slip that had been in the shipment, which also confirmed 12 bags delivered. 3 bags had vanished from my locked garage. Well, I say locked, but that is technically not accurate. I had one of those automatic garage door openers, and I usually kept it closed, But Deanna and I both had a bad habit of leaving it open during the day on weekends when we were doing yard work or projects. The garage door faced the street, so anyone walking or driving by could see inside when it was open. I started thinking maybe someone had just walked in and helped themselves when we were not paying attention. I mentioned it to Diana that evening over dinner, and she looked concerned. "That is really creepy," she said, setting down her fork. "Someone just walked into our garage in broad daylight." "I guess so," I replied. "I mean, I cannot think of any other explanation. I definitely had 12 bags delivered and I have only used 5. The math does not work otherwise." "Should we call the police?" I shrugged. "And tell them what?" "Someone maybe stole ice melt from our garage sometime in the last 2 weeks. We do not have any proof, no security cameras, nothing. They would take a report and that would be it." Diana nodded slowly. "Maybe we should get a camera." "I have been saying that for 2 years," I pointed out. She had always resisted the idea, saying she did not want to live in a surveillance state, but apparently stolen ice melt was the final straw. We ordered a Ring doorbell camera that night and a separate camera for the garage. They would arrive in a few days. In the meantime, I decided to keep a closer eye on things. I moved all my remaining bags into the house, storing them in the mudroom off the kitchen. It was not ideal, but at least I would know if anything else went missing. I also started paying more attention to my neighbors and who was walking around the subdivision. Meadowbrook Commons was the kind of neighborhood where everyone knew everyone else's business, mostly because of our incredibly active homeowners association. The HOA was run by a board of 5 people, who seemed to have nothing better to do than enforce the covenants with zealous enthusiasm. We had rules about everything. What color you could paint your house, how tall your grass could be, where you could park your cars, what kind of mailbox you could have, whether you could have a basketball hoop, what kind of Christmas decorations were allowed. The list went on forever. The HOA president was a woman named Brenda Carmichael, who lived 4 houses down from me on the same side of the street. Brenda was in her early 50s, with short blonde hair that she kept in that generic suburban mom style that somehow looked like every other HOA president in America. She drove a white Lexus SUV, wore athleisure outfits even though I had never seen her exercise, and had a voice that could cut through steel when she was upset about something. Brenda took her HOA duties very seriously. She walked the neighborhood almost every day, taking notes on violations and photographing anything she deemed non-compliant. I had received several nastograms from her over the years about various infractions. My grass was half an inch too tall. I left my garbage cans visible from the street for 3 hours past the pickup time. I had a small oil stain on my driveway that needed to be cleaned. Each violation came with a formal letter, a fine schedule, and a threat of legal action if not corrected within a specific time frame. Most people in the neighborhood tolerated Brenda because it was easier than fighting with her. She had sued 3 different homeowners over the past 4 years for various covenant violations, and while she had not won every case, she had won enough to make everyone nervous. The HOA had a legal fund, which meant Brenda could afford to pay lawyers while individual homeowners had to pay out of pocket to defend themselves. It was a rigged game, and she knew it. I tried to stay off Brenda's radar as much as possible. I kept my property maintained, followed the rules, and generally kept my head down. Deanna and I had talked about moving several times, but we loved the house itself, and the location was perfect for our commutes. We just had to put up with the HOA nonsense. The cameras arrived on Wednesday, and I installed them that evening. The Ring doorbell was straightforward, and the garage camera was just a matter of mounting it in a corner where it could see the entire space and the driveway approach. I set up the apps on my phone and tested the motion detection. Everything worked perfectly. That night, I slept a little better knowing I would at least have evidence if something else disappeared. Thursday and Friday passed without incident. I checked the camera footage a few times out of curiosity and saw nothing more interesting than the mail carrier and a couple of delivery trucks on the street. Saturday morning, I went out to spread some ice melt on the driveway since we had gotten a light dusting of snow overnight. I grabbed the bag from my mudroom and worked my way down the driveway, spreading the product evenly. As I was finishing up, I noticed Brenda walking up the street with her phone in hand, apparently on her morning patrol. She slowed down as she approached my house, and I could see her eyes scanning my property for violations. I gave her a polite nod and wave, which she returned with a tight smile that did not reach her eyes. "Morning, Isaac," she called out. "Keeping on top of that driveway, I see." "Trying to," I replied. "This winter has been rough." She stopped at the end of my driveway, looking at the ice melt I had just spread. "What brand are you using? That looks like professional grade." I found the question odd but answered anyway. "Yeah, it is calcium chloride from Northern Supply Solutions. Works way better than rock salt in these temperatures." "Northern Supply," she repeated, as if committing it to memory. "Where did you get it?" "Ordered it online. They ship from Milwaukee." Brenda nodded slowly, her eyes still on the ice melt. "Must be expensive." "It is not cheap, but it works." She looked up at me, and something in her expression made me uncomfortable. It was calculating, almost predatory. "Well, good for you," she said. "Not everyone can afford the premium products. Some of us have to make do with what we can find at the hardware store." I had no idea how to respond to that, so I just shrugged. "Have a good day, Brenda." She continued her walk, and I went back inside, shaking my head. Deanna was in the kitchen making coffee, and I told her about the weird interaction. "She was asking about ice melt," Deanna asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yeah, really specific questions too. What brand, where I got it, how much it cost." "That is strange even for Brenda." I agreed, but did not think much more about it at the time. I had errands to run and things to do, and I forgot about the conversation entirely until later that night. At 2:47 in the morning, my phone buzzed with a motion alert from the front porch camera. I was half asleep and almost ignored it, but something made me pick up the phone and check the app. The camera had activated because someone was on my front porch, and when I opened the live feed, I could not believe what I was seeing. Brenda Carmichael was standing on my porch, holding one of my bags of ice melt. I sat up in bed, my heart suddenly pounding. Deanna stirred next to me but did not wake up. I watched the live feed as Brenda looked around nervously, then picked up the bag and started walking quickly back toward the street. The camera had a pretty good view, and I could clearly see her face and what she was wearing: a dark puffy jacket and black pants. I jumped out of bed and ran to the window that looked out onto the street. I could see Brenda's figure moving quickly down the sidewalk, carrying the bag. She was heading toward her house. The bag she had just stolen had been sitting on my porch since earlier that evening when I had brought it out to use the next morning. I had not even thought about someone stealing it from the porch since the cameras were installed. The garage had been my concern. I grabbed my phone and checked the saved recordings. The motion alert had triggered at 2:47, and the camera had recorded the entire event. I watched it again, this time on the larger screen of my iPad. There was no question about what I was seeing. Brenda Carmichael, HOA president and self-appointed neighborhood watchdog, had just stolen a 50-pound bag of ice melt from my front porch. And then it hit me: the missing bags from my garage. Brenda lived close enough to walk past my house regularly. She was always out patrolling the neighborhood. She would have seen my garage door open on weekends. She could have easily walked in and taken the bags when Diana and I were not paying attention. The conversation from earlier that day suddenly made sense. She had been casing my current supply, seeing what I had and where I kept it. She had noticed the bag on the porch and come back in the middle of the night to steal it. I sat there in the dark, watching the recording over and over, trying to decide what to do. Part of me wanted to march down to her house right then and confront her, but that seemed like a bad idea at 3 in the morning. Another part of me wanted to call the police immediately, but I was not sure they would take a stolen bag of ice melt seriously enough to come out in the middle of the night. I decided to wait until morning and collect my thoughts. I had video evidence, which was more than I had for the garage thefts, but those were looking more and more like Brenda's work too. I needed to figure out how to prove the connection. That is when I remembered the batch numbers. I got out of bed and went down to the mudroom where I had stored my remaining ice melt bags. I grabbed one and looked at the label. Each bag had a white sticker with black text that included the product information, weight, ingredients, and at the bottom, a unique batch and serial number. My bags were all from batch number 260147, and the serial numbers were sequential. The bag in my hand was 260147-0084. I went to my home office and logged into the Northern Supply Solutions website. My account showed my order history, including the batch number and serial number range for my shipment. I had been sent bags 260147-0079 through 260147-0090. 12 bags, sequential numbers, all registered to my account and my address. The bag that Brenda had just stolen was 260147-0082. I had taken a photo of it before I set it on the porch, just as a general inventory habit from work. That specific bag was registered to me, and if it showed up at Brenda's house, there was no way she could claim she had purchased it legitimately. I spent the next hour documenting everything. I downloaded the video from the Ring camera and saved it in multiple locations. I took screenshots of my order history, the batch numbers, and the serial number records. I photographed my remaining bags and their serial numbers. I created a spreadsheet showing which bags I had used, which ones were stolen from the garage, and which one had just been stolen from the porch. By the time I was done, it was after 4 in the morning, and I was too wired to go back to sleep. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table trying to decide my next move. Deanna came downstairs at 6, surprised to find me already up and dressed. I showed her the video and her jaw dropped. "Are you kidding me?" she said, watching Brenda walk off with the bag. "That is Brenda." "That is Brenda," I confirmed. "And I think she is the one who took the bags from our garage too." I explained my theory and showed her the batch number documentation. Deanna listened, getting angrier by the minute. "So what are you going to do?" she asked. "I am going to call the police and file a report," I said. "And then I am going to figure out how to prove she has my property." Deanna nodded. "Do you think she is using it herself or selling it?" That was a good question I had not considered. "I guess I will find out." I called the Naperville Police Department's non-emergency line at 8 o'clock and explained the situation. The dispatcher said she would send an officer to take a report. Officer Martinez arrived at 9:15, a young woman who looked to be in her late 20s. She was professional and courteous, and she listened to my story without interruption. "So you have video of the theft from last night?" she asked, taking notes. "Yes, right here." I showed her the Ring camera footage on my iPad. Officer Martinez watched the video several times, zooming in on Brenda's face. "That is pretty clear," she said. "Do you know this person?" She lives 4 houses down, I said. Her name is Brenda Carmichael. She is the HOA president. Officer Martinez raised her eyebrows slightly but kept her expression neutral. And you think she also stole bags from your garage previously? I do, but I do not have video evidence of that. I only have the math. I ordered 12 bags, I have used 5, and I only have 6 remaining. That means 3 are missing, and now 4 if you count the one from last night. How much are these bags worth? About $30 each, so the one from last night is $30, and the 3 from the garage would be $90. Total of $120. Officer Martinez continued writing. And you mentioned something about batch numbers. This was the part I was excited to explain. I showed her the labels on my remaining bags, my order history, and the serial number registration system. Every bag in my shipment has a unique serial number that is registered to my name and address, I said. The bag she stole last night has serial number 2601470082, which is registered to me. If that bag is in her possession, there is no way she can claim she bought it legitimately. Officer Martinez looked impressed. That is pretty solid proof if we can find the bag at her residence. The problem is we need either consent to search or a warrant, and I am not sure a judge will issue a warrant over stolen ice melt, even with video evidence. The video shows her taking the bag from your porch, which is clear theft. We can arrest her for that. But proving she took the other bags from your garage is harder without evidence. We could ask her to consent to a search, but she will probably refuse. I thought about that. What if I could get proof she has the bags without a search? Officer Martinez gave me a careful look. What do you mean? What if I could see into her garage or yard and spot the bags? That is not illegal, right? I can look at things visible from the street. That is correct, Officer Martinez said slowly. Anything in plain view from a public space can be observed and reported, but you cannot trespass on her property. Understood. Officer Martinez finished her report and gave me a case number. I am going to go speak with Miss Carmichael about the theft from last night, she said. Based on the video evidence, we have probable cause for an arrest, but I will give her a chance to explain herself first. Sometimes people return property when confronted. If she has the bag and returns it, we might be able to resolve this without charges, depending on what you want to do. I want her charged, I said firmly. This is not just about the ice melt. She has been terrorizing this neighborhood for years with her HOA power trips. If she is stealing from people on top of that, she needs to be held accountable. Officer Martinez nodded. I understand. I will go talk to her now and will call you after. After Officer Martinez left, I sat down with Deanna and told her the plan. I need to see if Brenda has those bags somewhere visible, I said. If I can spot them from the street, the police can use that as additional evidence. How are you going to do that without being obvious? Deanna asked. I will just take a walk around the neighborhood. People do it all the time. I will walk past her house and see what I can see. Deanna looked skeptical but did not argue. Just be careful. If Brenda sees you snooping around, she will freak out. I waited until Officer Martinez had enough time to talk to Brenda, then I got my coat and headed out for a walk. It was cold but clear, and several other people were out walking dogs or getting their mail. I walked down my street casually, approaching Brenda's house from the direction opposite mine, so it would not be as obvious that I had come specifically to look at her place. Brenda's house was a 2-story colonial with an attached 2-car garage. The garage doors were closed, which was not surprising. I walked past slowly, looking around as naturally as possible. I could not see anything useful from the street. Her front yard was immaculate, as expected, with professionally landscaped bushes and a brick walkway leading to the front door. I continued walking around the block, trying to think of another approach. When I came back around, I noticed that Brenda's house was on a corner lot, which meant her backyard was partially visible from the side street. I walked down that street and slowed as I got a better angle. That is when I saw them. Behind Brenda's house, visible through the wooden slats of her fence, I could see a stack of white bags in the corner of her yard near the back of her garage. The bags were the same size and color as my Northern Supply ice melt bags. I could not read the labels from where I stood, but the bags were distinctive enough that I was pretty confident they were mine. I took several photos with my phone, zooming in as much as I could. The images were not perfect, but you could clearly see the bags and their location. I sent the photos to myself via email as backup, then called Officer Martinez using the number on her card. "Officer Martinez," she answered. "Hi, this is Isaac Foster. I just walked past Brenda Carmichael's house, and I can see several bags of ice melt in her backyard, visible from the public street. They look exactly like my bags." "Hold on," Officer Martinez said. I heard her speaking to someone else, presumably another officer or maybe Brenda herself. After a moment, she came back on the line. "Where exactly are these bags?" "In her backyard, in the corner near her garage. You can see them through the fence from the side street." I gave her the street name. "Okay, I am at her house now. Let me check that out and I will call you back." She hung up and I walked back toward my house, my heart pounding. I had no idea how this was going to play out, but at least I had given the police something to work with. 20 minutes later, Officer Martinez called back. "Mr. Foster, we have located 7 bags of ice melt in Miss Carmichael's backyard matching the description of your product. We checked the serial numbers, and all 7 bags are from your batch and registered to your address. 3 bags are opened and partially used, and 4 bags are unopened." I felt a surge of vindication. So she has been stealing from me. It appears that way. Miss Carmichael claims she purchased the bags from someone at a garage sale, but she cannot provide any receipt or name of the seller. Given the video evidence from last night and the serial number registration, we have enough to arrest her for theft. Are you still interested in pressing charges? "Absolutely," I said without hesitation. "Understood. We are taking her into custody now. You will need to come to the station later to provide a formal statement, and the state's attorney will be in touch about the prosecution." "What about my bags? Can I get them back?" "They will be held as evidence for now, but you should get them back eventually. We are photographing and documenting all the serial numbers for the case file." After I hung up with Officer Martinez, I told Deanna what had happened. She looked shocked but also pleased. "She is actually being arrested?" Deanna asked. "She is actually being arrested," I confirmed. "For stealing ice melt." Deanna started laughing, the kind of laugh that comes from disbelief and relief at the same time. "This is insane. The HOA president, who has been fining everyone for every tiny violation, is being arrested for theft." "The irony is not lost on me," I said. Word spread through the neighborhood faster than I expected. By that evening, several neighbors had texted or called to ask if it was true that Brenda had been arrested. I confirmed the basic facts without going into too much detail, and the responses ranged from shock to barely concealed glee. Brenda had made a lot of enemies during her time as HOA president, and not many people were sorry to see her face consequences. The next morning, I went to the police station to provide my formal statement. I brought all my documentation: the order receipt, the batch number records, the serial number registry, the Ring camera video, and the photos I had taken of the bags in Brenda's yard. The detective handling the case, Detective Williams, was thorough and professional. He reviewed everything carefully and asked detailed questions about the timeline and my interactions with Brenda. "This is one of the more unusual theft cases I have worked," Detective Williams said, shaking his head, "but your documentation is excellent. The batch number system makes this a slam-dunk case. She cannot explain how she came into possession of bags that are uniquely registered to you." "What happens now?" I asked. "She was arraigned this morning and released on her own recognizance. The state's attorney is charging her with theft, which is a misdemeanor since the total value is over $100, but under $500. She will probably try to negotiate a plea deal, but that is up to the prosecutor and her lawyer." "What kind of penalty are we talking about?" A misdemeanor in Illinois can carry up to a year in jail and a fine up to $2,500, but for a first-time offender, she will probably get probation, community service, and restitution. The conviction will go on her record, though. That seemed fair to me. I was not looking to ruin Brenda's life, but I wanted her to face real consequences for her actions. Over the next few weeks, the neighborhood gossip continued. The HOA board held an emergency meeting to discuss Brenda's arrest and what it meant for her position as president. I did not attend the meeting, but several neighbors who did told me it was contentious. Some board members wanted to remove Brenda immediately, while others argued she should be allowed to stay until her case was resolved. Eventually, they voted 3-2 to place her on administrative leave pending the outcome of her criminal case. Brenda's lawyer reached out to my lawyer. Yes, I hired a lawyer because I wanted to make sure this was handled properly, trying to negotiate a settlement where Brenda would pay restitution and apologize in exchange for me asking the prosecutor to drop the charges. I refused. This was not about the money. It was about accountability. The case moved slowly through the court system. Brenda pleaded not guilty initially, which meant it would go to trial. Her lawyer filed some motions trying to suppress evidence, arguing that the batch number system did not definitively prove the bags were mine, but the judge denied those motions. The evidence was too strong. Meanwhile, life in Meadowbrook Commons continued. With Brenda on leave, the HOA board was less aggressive about enforcement, and people started to relax a little bit. I noticed more basketball hoops appearing in driveways, and a few people let their grass get a little taller without receiving threatening letters. It was a nice change. In early April, about 2 months after Brenda's arrest, her lawyer contacted the prosecutor about a plea deal. Brenda was willing to plead guilty to theft in exchange for a recommendation of probation. The prosecutor called me to get my input, and I said I would accept that as long as Brenda paid full restitution for all 4 bags, paid for my legal fees, resigned from the HOA board, and received some jail time or serious community service. After some negotiation, the final plea deal was structured as follows. Brenda would plead guilty to a misdemeanor theft. She would serve 90 days in county jail on weekends, meaning she would check in Friday evening and be released Sunday evening for 12 consecutive weekends. She would pay me $120 in restitution for the stolen ice melt, plus $800 for my legal fees. She would perform 100 hours of community service. She would resign from the HOA board immediately. And she would be on probation for 2 years, during which any further legal violations would result in the full 1-year jail sentence being imposed. Brenda accepted the plea deal. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for late April, and I attended to provide a victim impact statement. Standing in front of the judge, I explained how Brenda's theft had felt like a violation of trust, especially coming from someone in a position of authority in our community. I talked about how her position as HOA president made her actions even more egregious, since she had spent years holding other people to strict standards while she was literally stealing from neighbors. The judge listened carefully and then addressed Brenda directly. "Miss Carmichael, you held a position of trust in your community, and you abused that trust in the worst possible way. You stole from a neighbor, someone who lived just a few houses away from you. The court takes theft very seriously, and the fact that you tried to cover it up by claiming you bought the items at a garage sale makes it worse. I am accepting the plea agreement, but I want to be clear that if you violate your probation in any way, you will serve the full year in county jail." "Do you understand?" Brenda, standing next to her lawyer, nodded meekly. "Yes, Your Honor." The judge signed the sentencing order and it was done. Brenda Carmichael, terror of Meadowbrook Commons HOA, was now a convicted thief. The neighborhood reaction was mixed. Some people thought I had been too harsh, and that it was just ice melt, not worth ruining someone's life over. But most people I talked to supported what I had done. They saw it as long overdue accountability for someone who had made life miserable for too many people. Brenda served her weekend jail sentence over the spring and summer. I would occasionally see her car leaving on Friday evenings, and I knew where she was going. She also completed her community service, which involved working at a food bank and cleaning up local parks. She paid me the full restitution and legal fees within the time frame required by the plea deal. The HOA board appointed a new president, a much more reasonable guy named Tom who actually listened to homeowners and focused on genuine community issues rather than petty enforcement. The whole atmosphere in Meadowbrook Commons improved noticeably. As for me, I learned a valuable lesson about the importance of documentation and traceability. My job had trained me to track products carefully, and that habit had directly led to solving this case. Without the batch numbers and serial number registration, I never would have been able to prove the bags were mine, and Brenda would have gotten away with it. I also invested in more security cameras around my property and made sure to keep better track of my belongings. The cameras proved useful several more times over the following months, catching a package thief once and recording a hit and run in front of my house that helped another neighbor's insurance claim. Diana and I talked about moving away from Meadowbrook Commons, but ultimately decided to stay. With Brenda gone and the new HOA leadership in place, the neighborhood was actually quite pleasant. We liked our house, we had made some good friends among the neighbors, and the location was still perfect for work. One unexpected benefit of the whole situation was that several neighbors reached out to thank me for standing up to Brenda. I heard stories I had never known about her harassment and bullying tactics, including some that were genuinely shocking. One elderly neighbor told me Brenda had threatened to foreclose on his house over unpaid HOA fines that he disputed. Another neighbor said Brenda had reported her to Child Protective Services claiming neglect because there were toys in the front yard. Neither of those situations had gone anywhere, but the fact that Brenda had tried showed how far she was willing to go. By the fall of 2026, life had pretty much returned to normal. Brenda had completed her jail sentence and community service, and she kept a very low profile in the neighborhood. I saw her occasionally driving past or getting her mail, but we never spoke. She always looked away when she saw me, and I was fine with that. The batch of ice melt I had ordered lasted me through the following winter as well. Every time I spread it on my driveway, I thought about the whole crazy situation and how a simple theft had unraveled because of batch numbers and quality control tracking. It reminded me that small details matter, whether you are working in manufacturing or dealing with theft. I also made sure to keep one bag of that original batch unopened as a memento. I stored it in a corner of my garage with a label explaining what it was and why I kept it. Deanna thought I was ridiculous, but I did not care. It was a reminder that standing up for what is right, even over something as mundane as ice melt, was worth the effort. The HOA continued under Tom's leadership, and while there were still rules and regulations, they were enforced reasonably and fairly. People were happier, there were fewer complaints, and the neighborhood felt more like a community than a police state. Several neighbors joked that we should buy me a plaque or rename the subdivision in honor of my ice melt victory, but I politely declined. I had never wanted attention or recognition. I just wanted my stolen property back and accountability for the person who took it. In the years since then, the story of Brenda and the ice melt has become something of a legend in Meadowbrook Commons. New neighbors moving in hear about it from existing residents, usually told with varying degrees of accuracy and embellishment. I have heard versions where I tracked Brenda down with GPS trackers, versions where I caught her red-handed in my garage at midnight, and even one version where she allegedly stole ice melt from half the neighborhood and was running some kind of black market operation. The truth, of course, was much more mundane. She stole 4 bags of ice melt, got caught on camera, and the batch numbers proved she had my property. It was not dramatic or exciting, but it was effective. Looking back on the whole experience, what strikes me most is how unnecessary it all was. Brenda could have just knocked on my door and asked to borrow ice melt. I would have given her a bag, no questions asked. Most people in the neighborhood would have. Instead, she chose to steal, presumably because she did not want to admit she needed help or could not afford to buy her own supply. That choice cost her everything. Her reputation, her position as HOA president, her clean criminal record, 90 days in jail, and the respect of her neighbors. All for 4 bags of ice melt worth a total of $120. It is a cautionary tale about pride, poor decisions, and the importance of treating people with basic respect and honesty. It is also a reminder that karma has a way of catching up with bullies and thieves, sometimes in unexpected ways. As for Northern Supply Solutions, the company that manufactured the ice melt, they were thrilled when I told them how their batch numbering system had helped solve a theft case. They asked if they could use my story in their marketing materials as an example of product traceability, and I agreed on the condition that they change my name and location. They sent me a $50 credit toward my next order and a nice thank you letter from the company president. I used that credit to order more ice melt the following winter. This time, I made sure to keep my garage door closed at all times, and I never left bags sitting on my front porch overnight. Some lessons you only need to learn once. The Ring camera system I installed stayed up and continues to serve me well. I have recommended it to several neighbors, and now most of the street has some form of security camera. Package theft in our neighborhood dropped to basically zero once the cameras went up, which benefits everyone. Deanna occasionally teases me about the ice melt incident, especially when I get particularly focused on tracking or organizing something around the house. "Do not make me pull the batch numbers," she will joke, and I will laugh because she is right. That experience reinforced habits I already had from work, and now I am probably even more meticulous about documentation and record keeping than before. But those habits have served me well in other areas of life too. When we had an issue with a contractor doing work on our house, my detailed notes and photographs of every stage of the project helped us resolve a dispute about what work had been completed. When our insurance company tried to deny a claim for hail damage, my documentation and time-stamped photos proved our case. Being organized and thorough is not exciting, but it is effective. The Meadowbrook Commons HOA never returned to the oppressive enforcement regime that existed under Brenda's leadership. Tom served as president for 2 years and then stepped down, and the board elected a woman named Sarah who was equally reasonable and focused on actual community improvement rather than petty rule enforcement. The neighborhood has thrived under the new approach. Property values in Meadowbrook Commons have actually increased since Brenda's departure, which I find both ironic and satisfying. Turns out that people prefer living in neighborhoods where the HOA is not constantly threatening them with fines and lawsuits. Who would have thought? I still live in the same house, still work at Midwest Solutions, and still order ice melt from Northern Supply Solutions every winter. I have never had another theft issue, and the cameras provide peace of mind. My driveway remains safe and ice-free throughout the winter months, thanks to the same calcium chloride ice melt that started this whole adventure. Brenda eventually moved out of Meadowbrook Commons about 2 years after her conviction. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she sold her house and moved to a condo in a different part of Naperville. I do not know if the move was related to the embarrassment of the theft conviction or if she just wanted a change. Either way, nobody missed her. The new owners of Brenda's house are a young couple with 2 small children. They are friendly, quiet, and respectful. They have never stolen anything from anyone, which automatically makes them an improvement over the previous occupant. Their kids leave toys in the front yard sometimes, and nobody cares because that is what normal neighborhoods look like. Every winter when the first snow falls, I think about that morning in February 2026, when I discovered 3 bags of ice melt were missing from my garage. I think about Brenda's calculating expression when she asked me where I bought my ice melt. I think about watching the Ring camera footage at 3 in the morning and seeing her walk off with my property. And I think about how those simple batch numbers on each bag brought everything together and delivered justice. It is funny how the universe works sometimes. The same quality control systems I work with every day at my job, the same attention to traceability and documentation that my career has trained me to value, ended up being exactly what I needed to solve a personal problem. If I had ordered generic ice melt from a hardware store, I never would have been able to prove those bags were mine. But because I ordered from a company that took quality control seriously, every bag was uniquely traceable back to my purchase. That is the power of good systems and good documentation. Whether you are tracking industrial chemicals or bags of ice melt, the principles are the same. Know what you have, know where it came from, and be able to prove it. Those simple practices can make all the difference when something goes wrong. I have told this story many times over the past few years, at work events, at parties, to friends and family. People are always amazed that something as simple as ice melt batch numbers could lead to a criminal conviction. But that is the point. Simple systems work if you use them correctly. Complexity is not always better. Sometimes the most effective solutions are straightforward and logical. The legal system worked the way it was supposed to in this case. The police took my complaint seriously, investigated thoroughly, collected evidence properly, and built a solid case. The prosecutor pursued charges appropriately. The judge imposed a fair sentence that held Brenda accountable while not being excessively punitive. And the plea deal process allowed for a resolution that delivered justice without the expense and uncertainty of a trial. I am proud that I stood up for myself and did not just let the theft go. It would have been easier to write off the missing bags and move on, but that would have let Brenda continue her pattern of behavior. She had been abusing her power as HOA president for years, and the theft was just another example of her believing the rules did not apply to her. By holding her accountable, I helped break that pattern and made the neighborhood better for everyone. The response from other neighbors validated that decision. So many people reached out to say they wished they had stood up to Brenda when she had targeted them. Hearing their stories made me realize that my situation was just one example of a much larger problem. Brenda had been a bully and a tyrant for a long time, and the theft was consistent with her character. In some ways, the ice melt theft was the best thing that could have happened to Meadowbrook Commons. It removed a toxic leader, it empowered residents to stand up for themselves, and it created an opportunity for positive change in how the HOA operated. If Brenda had never stolen those bags, she might still be president today, making life miserable for everyone. So while the whole situation was frustrating and stressful at the time, I can look back on it now with some satisfaction. Justice was served, the neighborhood improved, and I learned some valuable lessons about the importance of security and documentation. And every winter, when I spread Northern Supply Solutions calcium chloride ice melt on my driveway, I smile a little bit knowing the full story behind those white bags with the batch numbers printed on the labels. The most important lesson from this experience is probably the simplest. Do not steal from your neighbors, and definitely do not steal from someone who works in quality control and understands traceability systems. Those batch numbers might seem like meaningless numbers on a label, but they represent a chain of documentation that can prove ownership beyond any doubt. In the end, that made all the difference between a he said, she said dispute and an open and shut criminal case. Brenda learned that lesson the hard way, spending 12 weekends in county jail with plenty of time to think about her choices. I hope she took that time to reflect on how she got there and what she could have done differently. Maybe she came out of it a better person. I do not know, and honestly, I do not really care. My concern was making sure she faced consequences for her actions, and that goal was accomplished. Life in Meadowbrook Commons goes on. The seasons change. Winter brings snow and ice, and I keep my driveway clear and safe with ice melt that I purchase legally and keep secured on my property. The HOA continues to function, but in a much healthier way than it did under Brenda's authoritarian leadership. Neighbors are friendlier and less stressed. The community feels like a community again. And somewhere in my garage, that one unopened bag from batch 260147 sits on a shelf, serial number 260147-0087, clearly visible on the label. It serves as a reminder of an unusual chapter in my life, a strange story about theft and justice and the unexpected importance of batch numbers. It is not the kind of memento most people would keep, but then again, most people do not have a story quite like mine. Every now and then, when I am in the garage working on a project or getting something from storage, I see that bag and chuckle. The great ice melt caper of 2026, solved by quality control documentation and a Ring doorbell camera. It sounds like something from a comedy movie, but it really happened, right here in Naperville, Illinois, in the Meadowbrook Commons subdivision. And the best part is that my driveway has been perfectly maintained and ice-free ever since. No more stolen bags, no more drama, just good ice melt doing its job exactly as intended. Which, when you think about it, is all I wanted in the first place. That and for people to not steal my stuff. Apparently, that second part was too much to ask from an HOA president, but thankfully, the legal system corrected that problem. Justice served, lessons learned, and my driveway remained safe. all thanks to batch number 260147 and the serial numbers that traced right back to me, proving beyond any doubt that Brenda Carmichael had stolen my property. Sometimes the simplest systems are the most powerful, and this case proved that truth in the most unexpected way possible.